You're standing in your kitchen on a July afternoon, the fan pushing hot air around, and you're staring into the refrigerator wondering what you can possibly make that won't turn this room into an oven. Your grandmother never had that problem. She fed a whole family through blistering summers with no air conditioning, a tiny icebox, and almost no money. And the meals she made were cooler, cheaper, and better for an aging body than anything I ever bought in a package. I know that now. It took me most of my life to figure it out. For 40 years I did summers the expensive way, and I paid for it in dollars and in comfort, and I want to tell you exactly what I got wrong before you lose one more hot season to it. Stay with me, because near the end I'm going to share a farmhand's drink written down in cookbooks back in 1796, a 2-cent recipe that kept field workers standing upright in 100-degree heat when plain water made them sick. And every single thing I'm about to tell you works in the kitchen you already have, with the body you already have, starting today. I still remember my grandmother's back porch in the middle of August, a bowl of sliced tomatoes sitting in the shade with a saucer on top to keep the flies off, and her telling me that only a fool lights a stove in July. I laughed at her then. I was young and I thought convenience was progress. I was wrong, and it cost me more than I ever want to admit. Let me start with the meal I made fun of the most, because that's the one that humbled me first. A tomato sandwich. That's it. White bread, a thick slice of a ripe summer tomato, a little salt, a smear of something creamy. When I was younger, I thought that was a sad excuse for a lunch, a poor person's meal. Something you ate because you had nothing else. So for decades, I skipped right past it. On hot days, I'd drive to the store, buy cold cuts wrapped in plastic, buy chips, buy a soda, spend $8 or $9 on a lunch that left me sluggish and thirsty an hour later. Here's what I didn't understand. That tomato my grandmother handed me in August was picked ripe, sitting in the summer heat, and it was almost 95% water. She wasn't just feeding me. She was hydrating me. A ripe summer tomato carries potassium, and potassium is exactly the mineral your body burns through when you sweat. The United States Department of Agriculture has the numbers on this, and a single medium tomato gives you somewhere around 300 milligrams of potassium for almost no money and no cooking whatsoever. I paid dietitians, I paid for supplements, I bought potassium pills in a bottle when my doctor mentioned my numbers were a little low, and the whole time the answer was a 50-cent tomato on a slice of bread, the exact meal I'd been sneering at since I was a boy. When I finally started eating them again 2 summers ago, I noticed something within a week. I wasn't getting that dizzy, wrung-out feeling in the afternoons anymore. The thing I'd been paying a specialist to fix, my grandmother fixed on a porch in 1958 with a tomato in a saucer. But a tomato sandwich alone won't carry you through a summer, and my grandmother knew that too. Because the real trick wasn't any single meal. The real trick was a whole way of eating that kept the stove cold and the body cool. And that's where it gets interesting, because the next thing she made is something almost nobody under 70 has ever tasted. She called it bread and milk, and I need you to not laugh the way I did. On the hottest evenings, when nobody wanted anything heavy, she'd tear day-old bread into a bowl, pour cold milk over it, and sometimes add a spoon of sugar or a little sliced fruit. That was supper. And I remember thinking, even as a grown man, that this was the saddest food I had ever seen. It looked like something you'd feed a sick person. It looked like surrender. What I didn't know is that bread and milk, or milk toast, or bread soup, was one of the most common summer suppers in America for more than 100 years, and it shows up in household manuals going all the way back to the 1800s. There's a reason it survived that long. It costs almost nothing. It uses up bread before it goes to waste in the heat. It's cool going down. And for an older stomach that doesn't want a big hot meal on a sweltering night, it's gentle and it's filling and it lets you sleep. Think about what a bad night's sleep in the heat actually costs you. I used to eat a heavy dinner in summer, meat and potatoes, the whole thing, because I thought that was a proper meal. Then I'd lie awake half the night, too hot, my body working hard to digest all of it, the ceiling fan doing nothing. A heavy hot meal raises your body temperature at the exact moment you're trying to cool down for sleep. My grandmother knew without any study to tell her that a light cold supper on a hot night is the difference between rest and misery. I've since read that researchers studying sleep and body temperature have found the same thing, that your core temperature has to drop for you to fall asleep, and eating a big hot meal right before bed fights against that drop. She figured that out with a bowl of bread and milk. I paid for it with years of restless summer nights, tossing and sweating, blaming the weather when the problem was on my plate. And here's where I have to stop and tell you something that made me genuinely angry once I understood it, because up to this point in my life I thought I'd simply made my own bad choices. I hadn't. Not entirely. Somewhere along the way we were all sold a story. We were told that a real meal means a hot meal, a cooked meal, a meal that takes effort and equipment, and ideally something you buy already made. Look at how food was advertised to us from the 1950s onward. Frozen dinners, boxed mixes. The message, over and over, was that the old simple foods were beneath us now. That a modern person heats things up, buys things ready-made, spends money to save time. The tomato on bread, the bowl of bread and milk, the cold summer suppers our grandmothers survived on, those got quietly labeled as poverty food, something to be ashamed of, something to leave behind. And who benefited from us feeling that shame? Not us. We ran our ovens in July and paid to cool the house back down. We bought the packaged lunch instead of slicing the tomato. We spent, and we sweated, and we told ourselves it was progress. Every summer I did it, the expensive way was a summer somebody else profited from my forgetting what my grandmother knew for free. So let me keep going, because it gets better, and it gets cheaper, and the next one is a meal that people in the hottest countries on earth have relied on for centuries, while we in America were busy being embarrassed by it. Cold soup. And before you make the face I made, hear me out. The first time somebody put a bowl of cold soup in front of me, I was insulted. Soup is hot. Everybody knows soup is hot. Cold soup felt like a mistake, like somebody forgot to warm it up. But in the south of Spain, in a region called Andalusia, where summer temperatures regularly climb past 100 degrees, people have been eating a cold soup called gazpacho for hundreds of years, and there is nothing accidental about it. It is a survival food, engineered by people who lived in real heat long before anyone had a refrigerator. Here's what's in it, and here's why it's brilliant. Raw tomatoes, cucumber, a little onion, a bit of stale bread to thicken it, olive oil, a splash of vinegar, salt, all blended cold and eaten cold. Every ingredient is a water-heavy vegetable. The vinegar and salt replace exactly what you lose sweating. The bread makes it filling. And you never, not once, turn on any heat to make it. In the old days, a farm family would blend it up in the cool of the morning, keep it down in the cellar or the well, and drink it through the hot afternoon straight from a jug. I finally made a version of it myself, and I did it the lazy way because I'm not going to pretend I'm a chef. I took tomatoes, a cucumber, a small piece of onion, a slice of old bread, some olive oil, salt, and a little vinegar, and I blended the whole thing until it was smooth, and I put it in the refrigerator. It cost me maybe $2 for a big batch that fed me for 2 days. And on a 100-degree afternoon, drinking that cold and savory out of a glass, I finally understood what those Spanish farmers understood centuries ago. It cools you from the inside, it fills you up, and your stove stays stone cold. For years I'd been buying soup in cans, heating it up on a hot day because that's what you do with soup, paying $2 a can for something loaded with more salt than my body needed and none of the fresh water-rich vegetables that actually help in the heat. The better version, the older version, was cheaper, and it was sitting in history the whole time. Now, I've been giving you meals, but I want to pause here and talk directly to some of you because I know exactly who's listening right now and thinking, this all sounds fine for somebody with money and energy, but that's not me. Maybe you're on a fixed income and every dollar has a job before it even arrives. Maybe standing at a counter chopping vegetables hurts your hands or your back or your knees, and the idea of prepping a meal sounds exhausting. Maybe you live alone and cooking for one feels pointless. I want you to hear me clearly, because this next part is built for you specifically, and it's the part I wish somebody had handed me the day my own knees started to go. Everything I've talked about can be made with almost no strength, almost no money, and almost no standing. Let me show you how. That tomato sandwich? You don't need to chop anything. You slice one tomato sitting down at the table with a knife, and you're done. That is the entire labor. A bowl of bread and milk requires you to tear bread and pour milk, and you can do both sitting down. There is no recipe on earth gentler on a tired body than that. And here's a trick for the cold soup that removes even the blending. Because not everyone has a blender or wants to lift one. You don't have to blend it at all. The old country way, before electric blenders existed, was simply to chop everything small, or even just slice it. Put it in a bowl with water, a little vinegar, oil, and salt, and let it sit in the cold. In parts of Spain, they still eat it this way. Chunky, almost like a drinking salad. If chopping is hard, buy the tomatoes already canned and crushed. Pour them cold into a bowl, add a splash of vinegar and a pinch of salt and a drizzle of oil, and stir. That is a cold, hydrating, filling meal for well under $1 a serving, made entirely sitting down with one hand if you need to. If you want to go deeper into all of this, the forgotten meals, the old cooling methods, the cheap ingredients your grandmother never had to think twice about, I put everything I've collected into a book called Start Smart, and there's a fuller version called The Complete System for those who want the whole picture. You'll find both linked in the description below. These aren't recipes dressed up to look fancy. They're the practical, penny-wise knowledge that used to be passed down on back porches, written out so you can keep it and use it whenever the heat comes back. Now, let me keep going, because it gets better, and it gets cheaper, and the next one is a meal that people in the hottest countries on earth have relied on for centuries, while we in America were busy being embarrassed by it. Let me give you the almost free hydration trick too, because this one saved me real money. Sun tea. You take a clear jar, fill it with water, drop in a couple of tea bags, and set it in a sunny window or on the porch. The sun does all the work. In a few hours, you have a full jar of tea without boiling a single drop, without heating the kitchen, without touching the stove. My grandmother made it in an old glass jug on the back step. It costs pennies. And a cold glass of it beats any $4 bottled drink from the store, which is really just water you're paying somebody to have poured for you. And if money is truly tight this month, hear this. The single cheapest cooling food in the whole grocery store is a bag of cucumbers or a watermelon by the pound in season. My grandmother would slice cucumbers into a bowl with a little vinegar, salt, and water, and let them sit cold, and that was a side dish, a snack, and a way to get water into you all at once for almost nothing. Cucumbers are about 95% water. In the heat, that bowl does more for you than any expensive electrolyte powder in a fancy tub, and it costs about $1 to make. None of this requires you to be younger, richer, or stronger than you are right now. That's the whole point. These meals were invented by people who had less than you have today, in worse heat than you're sitting in, with none of the conveniences we take for granted. If they could stay fed and cool and upright, so can you, and you can do it without spending money you don't have. But I promised you something at the very beginning, and I keep my promises. Because all of these meals solve the food problem. They keep you fed and they keep the stove cold. There's one more problem the summer heat creates, the dangerous one. The one that actually lands older folks in the hospital every single year. And my grandmother had an answer for that too. It's the oldest secret I've got, and it's the best. The real danger in a hot summer isn't hunger, it's dehydration. And here's the cruel trick nobody warned me about as I got older. As you age, your sense of thirst fades. Your body stops telling you clearly that it needs water. Doctors have known this for a long time, and the studies on older adults are consistent, that the thirst signal weakens with age, so an older person can be badly dehydrated before they ever feel thirsty. That's how people my age end up dizzy, confused, weak, in the emergency room in July, not because they didn't have water, but because their body never told them to drink it. And here's the part that shocked me. Plain water, when you're sweating hard in real heat, isn't always enough, and can even work against you. When you sweat, you don't just lose water. You lose salt and minerals, potassium and sodium, the things that keep your muscles and your heart working right. If you sweat all that out and then pour in only plain water, you actually dilute what's left, and you can feel worse, not better. Farmers learned this the hard way 200 years ago. working in the fields and killing heat, watching strong men fall over drinking cold water by the bucket. So they made something else. And this is the recipe I want to leave in your hands, because it's the one that changed my summers completely. They called it switchel. Some called it haymaker's punch, because it was the drink that got them through haying season, the hottest, hardest work of the whole year, out under the open sun. It goes back to the 1700s, brought up through the Caribbean and into New England, and it was so common in early American farm life that it appears in one of the very first cookbooks ever printed in this country. Amelia Simmons published American Cookery in 1796, and drinks of exactly this kind were standard on farms all across the Northeast well into the 1800s. This is not folklore I'm inventing. This is written down in the historical record, a working drink from working people who lived and labored in heat that would put most of us flat on our backs. Here is what's in it. Water. A spoonful of vinegar, apple cider vinegar being the traditional kind. A sweetener, molasses in the old days, though honey or a little sugar works fine. And ginger, fresh or ground. That's the whole thing. You stir it together cold and you drink it cool through the day. Now watch how smart this actually is, because every single piece of it has a reason. The vinegar and the sweetener together do something plain water can't. The molasses in the original brought real minerals, including potassium, the exact thing you sweat out. The vinegar helps your stomach settle and, according to research from Arizona State University, apple cider vinegar taken with a meal can help steady your blood sugar, which matters a great deal for those of us watching that number. The ginger settles the stomach and has been used for queasiness for centuries, which meant a farmhand could drink it fast in the heat without feeling sick. And the whole mixture, being a little tart and a little sweet and a little sharp, actually makes you want to keep sipping it, which is the entire secret for an older body whose thirst signal has gone quiet. That's the genius of it. It solves the exact problem I told you was the dangerous one. When your thirst is failing you, when plain water tastes like nothing and you forget to drink, a jug of switchel sitting cold and flavorful in the refrigerator keeps calling you back to it. You drink more because it tastes good, and what you're drinking replaces the minerals you lost, not just the water. I make mine in a big glass jar in the morning. A quart of water, about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon or 2 of honey, and a good half teaspoon of ground ginger. I stir it, I taste it, I adjust it to what I like, and I keep it cold and drink it all day long. It costs me maybe 15 or 20 cents a batch. Compare that to the sports drinks in the store, $4 or $5, full of dye and corn syrup, sold to us as if athletes invented the idea of replacing salt and minerals in the heat. They didn't invent anything. Farmers were doing this 250 years ago with vinegar and molasses, and doing it better, and doing it for pennies. I think about all the summers I spent buying those bright-colored bottles, hauling them home, feeling responsible for staying hydrated, never once knowing that the real thing, the original thing, was 3 ingredients from my own pantry and a recipe older than the country itself. Somebody made a lot of money on my not knowing that, and on your not knowing it either. So this weekend, before the next hot spell, I want you to make 1 jar of switchel and keep it in the refrigerator. Water, apple cider vinegar, a little honey, a little ginger. Sip it through the day. See if by evening you don't feel steadier on your feet, less wrung out, less foggy than you usually do in the heat. That's not magic. That's just your body finally getting back what the summer takes out of it, the same way it got it back for the men bringing in hay under the July sun in 1820. Let me tie all of this together, because it's really one lesson wearing different clothes. Everything I've handed you today, the tomato on bread, the bowl of bread and milk, the cold soup from Spain, the cucumbers in vinegar, the sun tea on the windowsill, and the switchel in the jar, they all come from the same place. They come from people who had almost nothing and who could not afford to be wrong. They couldn't run an oven they didn't have. They couldn't buy a lunch in plastic. They couldn't cool the house back down after they heated it up. So they got smart, and they got simple, and they wrote it down, and then we forgot it, because we were told forgetting it was the modern thing to do. I spent 40 years paying for that forgetting. I paid in dollars at the grocery store and the pharmacy. I paid in sleepless, sweating nights. I paid in dizzy afternoons I blamed on my age, when really I'd just eaten and drunk all wrong for the heat. And the answers, every one of them, were things my grandmother did for free on a back porch while I stood there thinking I knew better. If you take nothing else from me today, take this. The old simple way was not the poor way. It was the wise way. It was the way that worked in real heat, on real budgets, in real bodies that were aging just like ours. And it still works, right now, in whatever kitchen you're standing in, with whatever money you've got, and with whatever strength your hands have left. You don't need to be younger. You don't need to be richer. You don't need one single thing you don't already own. You are exactly the kind of person these methods were made for. Someone who's tired of being sold the expensive version of something your own grandmother did for pennies. Someone who would rather do it yourself and keep your money and your dignity both. So here's what I want to know from you. And I'm asking you straight, because I know you don't always leave a comment, and I'm asking you to today. Did your family have a summer meal like these, something cold and cheap that you'd almost forgotten until right now? Was it a tomato sandwich? A bowl of bread and milk? Something with cucumbers and vinegar? A drink your grandmother kept in the icebox? Tell me what it was, and tell me where you're watching from, because I read these and I love knowing which corners of the country these old recipes come from. Leave it in the comments below right now while you're thinking of it. And if you're the kind of person who wants to keep recovering these forgotten, practical things, the tricks that save you money and keep you independent in your own home, then come along with us, because that's exactly what we do here, one buried secret at a time. There's a whole group of us now, taking this knowledge back from the people who profited off us losing it. Because next time I'm going to show you the forgotten way our grandmothers kept a house cool in a heat wave with no air conditioning at all, using nothing but a window, a wet cloth, and a trick about which direction the air moves at night that I promise you have never heard. It cost them nothing. It worked every time, and it's been sitting quietly in the old household manuals this whole time, waiting for someone to remember it. I remembered it, and next time, I'm handing it to you. Now, this video gave you the taste, but the full continuation is waiting inside the Wise Living Circle. In there, you can ask me your own questions, and I answer you myself, not some machine. And you won't be alone. So many folks like you are already right beside you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime, no risk at all.